This is what Nehemiah did. I want to share with you what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah knew his past. He knew his future. His present. But he realized that if he would just work with the present circumstances that God had put in front of him, his future, he could change the future of many generations. And this is what took place. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, and now it happened in the month of Shizel, that in the 20th year, while I was in Susa, the capital, that Hanai, one of my brothers, and some men of Judah came. And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped and had survived the captivity about Jerusalem. And they said unto me, the remnant here in Providence who survived the captivity are in great distress and reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. Now it came to pass, when I heard these words, I sat down and I wept, and I mourned for days, and I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. What would happen if you went in the place that you worshiped, the place that was God's place, was no more, was broken down? You had nowhere to go. Nehemiah wept and he fasted. He started praying. This is what took place in Nehemiah 2, 1 through 10. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, the 20th year of King Ahasuerus, that wine was before him, and he took up the wine and gave it to the king. And now I had not been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, why is your face sad, though you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart. Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. He was bringing the cup to the king, and he was sad. And the king asked him, why are you sad? He says, then I was very much afraid, and I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies desolate, and its gates have been consumed with fire? Then the king said to me, what would you request? Man, what would blow your mind if God says, what do you request? What do you want? Well, what if the King of Heaven came down and said, Randy, what do you want? Cindy, what do you want? Patience, what do you want? Rita, what do you want? Would that not blow your mind? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and he said to the king, if it please the king, and if your servant has found favor before you, send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will your journey be, and when will you return? The king asked another question. How long is the journey, and when will you come back? Do you know we're on a journey with God? You're on a journey. When you were birthed, you didn't come from your mama and your daddy. You came through them, but you came from God. And God says you're on a journey now, and he's with you on this journey. And obviously we all want to live forever. Don't get me wrong. And don't no one want to die. But there's a day he's going to say, when will you return? So if it please the king, send me. And I gave him a definite time. You know, God has given us a definite time. 70 years is 70 years. Reason by strength, 80 years, which is 80 years. Anything after that, you're on your own. Just because you've taken care of your body, you've taken care of that temple God gave you, your sanctuary, your body. And he said to the king, if it please the king, let letters be given to the governors of the province beyond the river, that may allow me to pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asa, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates and the fortress, by which the temple, for the walls of the city, and for the house to which I will go. Do you know God is preparing you a house in heaven? A mansion. Not a house, a mansion. He's got an Asa up there. And he said to the king, and the king granted to them me because the good hand of my God was upon me. You need God's hand on your life. You need to be praying, Lord, let your hand be on my life. Then I came to the governors of the provinces beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent me the officers of the army and the horsemen. Do you know, let me go back. He said, then I came to the governors of the provinces beyond the river, and God's hand was upon me. And I gave them the king's letters. Do you know who the king's letters are? It's the Bible you got in your hand. You got the king's letter. It's called the Bible. And everywhere you go, you can have it. He said, now the king had sent me with officers of the army and the horsemen. You know who that is? God encamps around you, angels. He said, and when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. Now you know you're going to have some hornets and some Ammonites trying to come up on you. I hate some hornets because they try to sting you and it may hurt for a second, but you can kill them. You just swat them. Anyways, and Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, officially heard about it, and it was very displeasing to them that someone had come to seek the welfare of the sons of Israel. Guess what? The devil ain't going to be happy when you start making things right. When you start saying, you know what, God, I want to run with you, and I don't care who comes before me. I want to do what you called me to do. You're going to have a Sanballat and a Tobiah in your life that's going to try to come and make havoc in your life. But this is where God comes in. Seed number 5. God brings compassion. Compassion. People that achieve greatness are people of compassion. They are people with hearts, but real compassion requires more than just a heart. It requires a hand. You can have compassion in your heart, and you can say, man, I feel sorry for that person. But that's sympathy. Compassion is when you literally take your heart and your hand comes together and compassion becomes. Jesus gave us the great example of what compassion was and what it was all about. Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 and 38 is one instance. Jesus was going about all the cities and the villages teaching and all their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. And seeing the multitudes, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed, they were downcast like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said unto his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Even in Jesus' day, it was that way. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. God has called us to go to the distressed and the downcast, to show compassion. Matthew 10, 1 through 8, and having summoned his 12 disciples. Jesus summoned his 12 disciples. When he did this, he gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out, to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Do you know you got the power of God in your life? You can touch heaven, and heaven will touch you, and you can heal the sick, and they shall recover. Most people just say, well, that was in the Bible days. No, that is today. Amen. God gives us the ability and the authority over sickness and over disease. Why? Because he lives in our life. These 12, Jesus said, these 12 he sent out after instructing them, saying, do not go in the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter into the city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. You know what he's saying? There's some people you know who won't serve God, and they're sitting on the sidelines today. Go get them. That's what he's saying.